Home Run Derby. Many of you know it from the All-Star game, a little friendly competition before the game, a contest between the best power hitters in the league. A bit of fun once a year, but not much more than that. Except it is a lot more. For me, a black and white version of Home Run Derby was my introduction as a kid to baseball history, to the legendary ghosts of the past. And I think it might factor into what I'm doing now with this podcast. These ghosts have been haunting me, whispering in my ears to pay more attention to the past. Tonight, I'll discuss what Home Run Derby has meant to me. I'll talk about the roots of this simple contest dating back to two iconic moments in history. I'll explain where this idea, this event came from, how it might one day become its own sport, and how the resurrection of the original Home Run Derby from 1960 not only led a woman back to her father, but also to the love of her life. From historic milestones
That did it! Holy cow! A strikeout gets his 300th career win, and I tell you, this is
to euphoric moments shared by millions,
in a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
to the simple banter that brought us together,
Yeah, it's foul. Malachi with the call. I love that name.
It's a good name.
When you and I have a child together, we should name him Malachi.
Welcome to the Midnight Library of Baseball, Season 4, the broadcast that raised us, from radio to television and beyond. I'm Ben Orlando. First, I want to explain what Home Run Derby means to me. And I'm talking about the show that was produced in 1959 and aired in 1960. I remember when I was 12 years old in 1988. It wasn't uncommon for me to watch reruns of shows from the 50s and 60s. I Love Lucy, Leave It to Beaver. The shows were entertaining because of the stories, the plots, but also because everything was so different. The clothes they wore, the cars they drove, the way they acted. But they were also just make-believe. What was real? What was fake? I didn't know. But that same year, 1988, I started watching another old black and white show, which appeared on ESPN. It was called Home Run Derby, and it was real. I mean, it was a contrived contest, but the people weren't characters. They were real people with real names. They talked about their real lives. The show had a simple concept. I'll let the host, Mark Scott, explain.
Come on in, fellas. Mickey, welcome once again.
Thank you, Mark.
Harmon, welcome to you for the first time to Home Run Derby.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, gentlemen, today you're going to go for the big money. The winner will receive $2,000, the loser $1,000. As an added bonus, anytime either one of you should hit 3 consecutive home runs, as Mickey did last week, you'll receive a bonus of $500. The 4th home run in a row is worth another $500. Each consecutive home run after that is worth another $1,000. Now, fellas, you'll play 9 innings. You'll have 3 outs per inning. Any ball not hit out of the ballpark is an out. You don't have to swing at every pitch, but if the ball is in the strike zone and you don't swing at it, that also constitutes an out.
That was it. 2 hitters, a pitcher, a host, and a contest. And for some reason I didn't understand at the time, I was completely captivated. I think at first it was the novelty. It was basically unscripted. It was like these cameramen walked over, just stumbled over to this game and started recording it. I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was watching was one of the first reality television shows, long before this term reality television was popularized in the 1990s. The Academy of Television Arts and Sciences categorized reality/competition programs as, quote, specials or series that include a game, competition, or some sort of contest with a prize attached, end quote. Reality shows also had simple, repeated structures. They typically weren't scripted, and the drama was created by the participants, by their personalities and achievements. Home Run Derby checked all of these boxes. And this was relatively new for 1960, but it was also still new for 1988. There weren't a lot of reality TV shows in 1988, other than game shows. So this would have been pretty cool for me. Not only did I not know what was going to happen, nobody did. It was a non scripted sporting event, and at the same time, it wasn't like watching sports. It was a contest with baseball stars showing off their abilities and then casually chatting in between. But what else made this special for my 12-year-old self was the mythology. At the time, I didn't know much about baseball history. These names, Mays, Mantle, Killebrew, Aaron, I would have had a fleeting recognition of them. They wouldn't have brought up backstories or images, but they still carried labels like heroic, legendary, iconic. I imagine a kid wandering into the attic, opening a chest with old pictures and clothes and trophies. He might not know the stories, but he would have felt the history. That was me with this show. I was able to watch these vaguely familiar legends in their time, in this strange, unfamiliar world. It wasn't so different. Like, if I went to sleep and woke up at the ballpark during production of the show, it might have taken me a minute to realize where I was in time. The park, the benches, the bleachers, the grass, they would have been familiar enough. But little by little, I would have started to catch the differences, like the uniforms, like the old microphones and camera equipment, like the way everyone talked and behaved. Very polite, almost deferential from the players, even though they were bigger stars than the host.
Well, Duke, you've run up against Henry Aaron while he's on a winning streak.
That's right, Mark. Hank is one of the most terrific competitors in the game today.
Well, we'd certainly like to have you come back. Will you do it?
I sure would. I'd be very happy to.
We'll accept this check then for $1,000 with our congratulations.
Thank you, Mark. And Hank, good luck to you, and hit lots of home runs now in this program, but don't hit any against the Dodgers.
Thank you, Duke.
But I think on some level, it was the haunting feeling that stuck with me. The feeling that these men, these legends on the field, in their prime, were long gone. This has to do with the difference between actual death and professional athlete death, which is a fascinating topic. To a young baseball fan, these two types of deaths were pretty close to the same thing. Because when an athlete, superstar or not, retired from the game, he usually disappeared from the face of the earth, at least in the minds of fans. Fans wouldn't forget him, but they'd remember him as he was, not as he is or continues to be. I guarantee that my 12-year-old self had no idea if any of these famous players from Home Run Derby were still alive in 1988. In fact, most of the 19 participants were. To me, they were baseball legends by the very fact that they were invited to Home Run Derby. And then, at some point, the world changed and they disappeared. So, for me, for that 12-year-old self, it was like I was watching ghosts. And this is the strange mix. On one hand, these players are legends, mythical. But in the show, they're normal, everyday people who laugh and joke. But then again, this black and white program from 30 years earlier turns them back into legends, back into ghosts. And all of these things, I think, is why Home Run Derby was so fascinating to me. So that's my story with Home Run Derby. But what is the story behind the show? In 1952, a 37-year-old man named Mark Scott became the play-by-play announcer for the Hollywood Stars of the Pacific Coast League. In 1951, Scott was doing radio recreations of minor league games during the day. And at night, he was broadcasting live minor league games from the park. Well, that year, Scott was in Cuba on a honeymoon with his new wife. And he ran into J.G. Taylor Spink, publisher of the Sporting News, which was the greatest newspaper at the time. Scott told Spink he was looking for a higher level job, and Spink suggested he talk with Bob Cobb, owner of the Hollywood Stars. Scott got the job announcing for the Stars, and it wasn't long before he was a fixture in the Hollywood community. He became friends with celebrities and started getting roles in sports films, mostly playing a broadcaster. Two of the actors he became good friends with were former ball players turned actors. One was Chuck Connors, very famous in his day for the show The Rifleman. The other was Michael Dante. And this little fact will become important later on. But someone else who became a friend of Scott's was a writer-producer named Lou Breslow. It was Breslow who came up with the idea for Home Run Derby, and he shared it with Scott, who loved it. They went all in, creating a production company called Homer Productions with a few friends. The problem was that the big three networks at the time wanted more glitz and glamour. But Breslow and Scott saw the beauty of simple access. They just wanted to give millions of baseball fans access to their favorite players. So they worked with a small company called Ziv Productions to create a syndicated show they could sell across the country to small stations. But this meant they'd have a tiny budget. They'd have to pay for flights and accommodations for the players and for the prize money. And this wouldn't have left room for much else. The show had only Mark Scott as the host. It had a home plate umpire, 2 foul line umps, a catcher, 2 pitchers, and kids in the outfield to grab the balls. And the 2 participants, of course, they were the main attractions. But that's all they needed. Because another underestimated factor about the show that would have enticed fans was the chance to hear their favorite players talk. Today, we take for granted that we see our big heroes doing interviews, sitting down with broadcasters, even mic'd up while playing in the field. But back in the 50s, you might have seen your favorite player a lot, but you wouldn't have heard him. So Home Run Derby was a novelty in that way. Even if Mantle and Mays and Gil Hodges weren't doing anything more than chit-chatting, it was still fun to get this peek into the secret lives of baseball players. What did they sound like? What did they act like? And you could tune in every week to find out.
Henry, you got shut out in the first.
Yes, I'm used to getting off to those slow starts, Mark.
Well, maybe things will change for you pretty soon.
They will.
You know, I was just checking the records, and I found out that the top home run hitters in baseball only get a home run about every 12 or 13 trips to the plate.
That's right. I went to plate 600 times, and I think I averaged a home run every 15 times at plate.
These are the voices of host Mark Scott and player Hank Aaron. According to writer Don Zminda, who has a great article about Home Run Derby on Sabre, the show was very popular, and it would have been easily renewed for a second season. But the fantasy was broken in 1960, just halfway through the airing of the show, when the host, Mark Scott, died of a heart attack at the age of 45. Scott was a huge part of the show, so when he died, the show died with him. But the idea of it didn't die. It couldn't, because long before there was a television show, long before there were cameras or prize money or sponsors, people had already gathered in huge crowds to watch one man step forward, swing a bat, and try to send a baseball as far as it could possibly go. If you can't get enough baseball history and you've run through all my content, you should check out the podcast My Baseball History. Dan Wallach, the creator and host, dives deep into the history of the game through interviews with people at all levels of baseball, from the president of the Hall of Fame to former players to organists and official team historians. He's probably going to give you an inside look at parts of the game you never even thought of. You can find his show, My Baseball History, on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. You can also find more information on shoelesspodcast.com. I'm going to turn now to a fascinating article on ESPN.com, written in 2019 by Sam Miller. The title is How the Home Run Derby Became America's National Pastime. But you will not guess where this article ends up. It's a pretty wild ride, beginning in actual history and ending in speculative future. Miller points out that way back in 1919, a young slugger named Babe Ruth was the true inventor of the home run derby. Between major league seasons, Ruth would go on barnstorming tours, and part of the show was letting people line up before, after, even during games to watch Ruth hit the ball out of the park. In 1924, 1,700 fans came out to the Natatorium Park in Spokane to watch Babe Ruth hit home runs. From the Spokesman Review, quote, all around the high baseball park fence, kids of the ragged variety clung with fingernails and toenails and watched for cops. In the stands, bank presidents, lawyers, hod carriers, and other kids ate peanuts and cheered hoarsely. Babe Ruth and Bob Musial were in town yesterday, and Christmas and Thanksgiving paled into insignificance. End quote. From Sam Miller, quote, this was the philosophical origin of the home run contest. The single-handed pursuit of home runs had become more marketable, more meaningful than the baseball played on those afternoons under real rules. End quote. Over the next few decades, barnstorming or exhibition games often had a home run contest in the mix. Miller includes a great example of the power of one of these contests. This is a story told by a great home run hitter in his own right, Frank Howard, talking about another baseball legend, Ted Williams. Quote, Ted had to be 53, 54 years old. While the other guys were hitting, he was in the dugout, swinging a bat and grinding himself up. He was the last one to hit, of course, and when he went up there, you knew he was ready. First pitch, he hit a little looper over second base. Second pitch, he pulled a frozen rope by first base. Third pitch, he put it on the warning track. Fourth pitch, he put it in the bullpen. Fifth pitch, he hit it 30 rows up in the right field stands. Then he threw the bat up in the air and walked back to the dugout. The place went wild. Greatest single sports event I've ever seen. End quote. Let's put this into context. Frank Howard had 16 major league seasons. He led the league in home runs multiple times. He was a 4-time All-Star, MVP, Rookie of the Year, and World Series champion. And he's saying that watching a 54-year-old Ted Williams compete in a home run contest was the greatest single sports moment he'd seen. That's saying a lot. Baseball is a team event, and of course individuals do great things. But the power and abilities of an individual can get diluted by the rest of the players. But a home run derby is a chance for that one man to shine. It's why singers and bands go solo, because the band couldn't contain them. So before and after Home Run Derby in 1960, there were home run contests, but they were not televised across the country. This show was a massively shared experience because of television. In 1985, the Home Run Derby was incorporated into the MLB All-Star Game. But it wasn't until 1993 that ESPN began airing the Home Run Derby as a separate entity from the All-Star Game. And no doubt part of the reasoning was the 1988 re-airing of Home Run Derby on ESPN. And just like Frank Howard's singular memory of Ted Williams' one-man show, fans would remember not only the All-Star Game, but the Home Run Derbies that preceded them. In 2008, Josh Hamilton overcame drug addiction to win the Derby with a record 28 home runs. In 2018, Bryce Harper clinched the title with the clock ticking down, and he did it in his home park in front of howling fans. And home run derbies did something else. They clearly showed how much better players became year after year, at least when it came to hitting home runs. As Miller pointed out, Ryne Sandberg won the 1990 Derby with just 3 home runs. 3. In 2016, Giancarlo Stanton won the Derby with 61 home runs. What a difference. 3 home runs, 61 home runs. Players were getting better and better, and fans could see it. Fans wanted to see it, evidenced by the fact that in 2017, as many people watched the Home Run Derby as they did the All-Star Game. But something funny was happening as the Derby got more serious. Fans clearly wanted to see this event that really didn't matter. But players weren't so interested because to them, it didn't really matter. All that exertion could tweak something. It could hurt them for the rest of the season, which did matter. So Major League Baseball sweetened the deal. In 2019, they said, well, what if we pay $1 million to the winner? And that's just what they did, and still do. Now, I said Sam Miller starts to go off the rails in this article, but he goes off in the best way. Because based on what happened in the last 25 years, Miller speculates about what will happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years. He imagines the All-Star Game Home Run Derby eventually allowing one up-and-coming minor league player to participate. And then this minor league player happens to win the Derby, beating the best power-hitting major league players and earning $1 million. So, since this prize is so big, some minor league players would start to train for one specific task, hitting home runs off slow pitches in home run derbies. And soon it's not just minor league players, it's any person with the skills to hit home runs that are invited to the Derby. And this event gets so big, they start to host more derbies throughout the year until Home Run Derby becomes its own sport, with people, not just ball players, anyone getting specifically trained and coached on how to hit home runs. Here's a really fun imagining by Sam Miller of what Home Run Derby might look like in 20 years, 2034. Quote, the Derby stars came in all shapes. Some were behemoths imported from strongman competitions, swinging colossal 55-ounce bats. Other stars were bat control technicians who mastered the act of hitting balls just a few feet farther than necessary, over and over and over, and who never seemed to tire or take a bad swing. When Anthony David Power, a high school coach from Fresno, hit homers on 165 consecutive swings in 2034, Mike Trout called him the greatest athlete in the world. Nike gave Power a $100 million endorsement deal. His bat went to the Baseball Hall of Fame. The final Derby souvenir that would be sent to Cooperstown. All future memorabilia would go to the Derby Hall of Fame. End quote. This is fun to think about, right? And it makes sense. Ever since Babe Ruth came along, the home run has taken over the game of baseball. So the next logical step would be for the home run to have its very own sport. But I'm actually shocked that there's never been a modern version of the 1960s format. I understand that major leaguers wouldn't want to hurt themselves, but you could even take ex major league players or players who just left the game, and that would remove the risk of injury. I think that would gain a following on social media, on YouTube. But whatever the future holds, whatever the origins of home run hitting contests, there is, in my opinion, no greater marriage of this event and television than Mark Scott's Home Run Derby from 1960. Television at this time was just advanced enough to capture most of the baseball flying through the air, either into a glove or out of the park. But television is definitely advanced enough to capture the close up images of the players talking with Mark Scott, players normally only seen from a distance. And remember, this was recorded in 1959. That's only a few years after integration. 4 of the 19 participants were African American, and the participant with the most wins was Hank Aaron. You might remember I started this episode with the story of Home Run Derby and love. In 1988, at the same time I was watching reruns of Home Run Derby on ESPN, someone else was watching. Mark Scott's daughter, Mary Jane, who was only 8 when her father died, and was 36 when her mother told her about this baseball show that would be on at 1:30 in the morning. So Mary Jane stayed up and she watched, and she was mesmerized. According to Mary Jane, quote, "There's my dad, just like I remembered him. It was like an episode of The Twilight Zone. It was just mind-blowing." End quote. After some time, Mary Jane reached out to a columnist, Larry Stewart, who had written about the return of Home Run Derby. Stewart invited Mary Jane to meetings of the Southern California Sports Broadcasters Association, who happened to be honoring Home Run Derby. At one of these meetings, Mary Jane met ballplayer turned actor Chuck Connors, and Connors introduced her to the other ballplayer turned actor I talked about earlier, Michael Dante. Mary Jane and Michael Dante fell in love. If ESPN hadn't re-aired Home Run Derby in 1988, Mary Jane wouldn't have watched it. She wouldn't have reached out to Larry Stewart, who invited her to these meetings. And she wouldn't have met her true love, whom she married. And they're married to this day. From Mary Jane Dante, quote, "It was my dad who introduced me to Michael through Chuck Connors. My whole life changed through the return of Home Run Derby. It's a miracle. My dad is alive and well. He is my guardian angel." End quote. I thought I was watching ghosts, but I guess they were watching us too. Our listener baseball story tonight comes from Claire from New Mexico.
My folks moved to Marin County, which is where I grew up, which is across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. My folks moved out there from Massachusetts, and myself and my 2 brothers were born there. I have 3 older sisters that were born in Massachusetts. So my dad was a diehard Red Sox fan, and the Giants had just moved to San Francisco from New York. My dad always had the Giants games playing on, the AM radio, because we couldn't pick up Red Sox games back at that time. My family, we were just very sports oriented. It was just part of our lifestyle. I got married very young. I had 2 girls, and I got my degree in electromechanical design. And so I was working in that field for many years. But I got to tell you, I was miserable. I hated it because I'm a people person. I kept thinking about being involved with baseball, and then saw this woman locally. She helped people figure out what kind of job they want to have. I forget what that term would be called. But anyway, she met like every couple of weeks in her home. And so I go to her house, and there's like a half a dozen people. We're all sitting in a circle talking about our work experiences and what we wanted different. Well, everyone's talking about, these normal corporate jobs, whatever. She comes around to me, and as God is my witness, I don't know why I said this, but she came to me. She goes, "Claire, what are you looking to do? What is it you don't like?" And I told her about the commute. And she goes, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to work in baseball." And I looked around like, did I just say that? She looked at me like, baseball? So we had a good laugh, and I thought that was pretty wild. And so the very next day, I'm at my job. I get a phone call from her. She goes, "Claire, you're not going to believe this." I said, "Hey, what's up?" She goes, "The Giants are hiring." I said, "Get out of here." I thought she was totally teasing me. She goes, "No, there's an ad in the Chronicle. They're looking for folks." So I thought, this has got to be a joke. So I called up. I got a job interview for the very next day. They hired this consultant to bring people in to help sell tickets, because that was their biggest issue. So I started to work with the Giants, and I was working as an outside salesperson, but I sold so well. I was selling ticket packages. So yeah, they brought me in full time, and I worked in the ticket office, and I worked ticket sales, but I also then became the manager of community events. The first couple of Saturdays, on one level of the ballpark and another level of the ballpark, they would have tables set up, and they would have a couple of guys sit there and sign autographs. And so that became part of the Giants routine. And so my daughters, they were both, high school age at that point. They would go down to the clubhouse, and they would escort the ball player up to the table to where, they would then sign. What it did was basically, it taught my girls, you can do anything you want. I mean, look at what Mom's doing. So they got that ingrained in them, that literally you want to do it, you can do it. It also taught them to not be starstruck, because there's a lot of folks that are in sports that are just, you can use your imagination. I don't know very many people that have had the experience that I've had. And I don't mean that to sound boastful. It's the fact that I wanted to be involved in baseball, and I got involved. And my daughters, it taught my girls, you can do anything you want.
Thanks, Claire, for sharing your amazing story. In episode 11, we're going to talk about television, not as a backdrop to baseball, but as a force that quietly decided who got to be a hero and who was unfortunately cast as the villain. In 1960, television played an important role in turning public opinion away from Richard Nixon and toward John F. Kennedy. Just 1 year later, television would weigh in on one of the greatest home run races in baseball history. Next time on the Midnight Library of Baseball. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergi Papkin and Ashot Danielian, and other artists at Pixabay and Artlist.io. Good night.